Welcome back, everyone, to the Hearthstone Grandmasters European region. We have our third match of the day coming up for you guys, and it's going to be the winners match from this group, Jarla versus Thijs. So, funnily enough, Sol, we spoke a lot about Priest top four, coming into this week looking really strong, and both Priest players have lost today so far. We are going to have a Priest mirror later, so get comfortable for that in a little bit. But for now, we are going to have Mali Druid versus Highlander Mage. And honestly, if you asked me at the start of this week if we were going to see this as a matchup, I wouldn't have thought so. Honestly, I don't think I would have ever said that if I'm going to be completely honest with myself. I don't think a lot of people initially put a lot of hope on Highlander Mage getting the work done. But at least for Jarla, it seems to be doing the job so far. I just wonder, Sol, how do you think it's going to deal with a Malygos Druid?
Yeah, it's a potential tough one, right? Because, again, that kind of inevitability that comes through from Mali Druid is certainly problematic. Mage does have the tools to just explode early and get big threats into play. You know, they can wild growth themselves early with Zephyrus if they get it, and then start really popping off with big Dragon Caster turns with Power of Creation and so on.
Right.
I wonder, again, whether we might see the secondary deck come out here from Jarla when he has the opportunity to, because again, that Khadgar pop-off is something that potentially he could use to beat Druid, right? Like if we see the board get made that he made against Psycho in the previous series, where it's just Khadgar, Conjurer's Calling, boom, there's a couple of Colossus of the Moon and Nazaris, that's not a board that Druid really has the tools to deal with.
Right.
You might have to see like the Malygos combo thrown back the other way just for a board clear in that sense, which then gives you an opening in the matchup. But yeah, I imagine it's going to be fairly tight, but we might just see Mali Druid coming good again here from Thijs, who put in a very impressive performance with it in the first series.
Yeah, one thing I'm wondering as well is how much these players have even had a consideration for this matchup, because as I mentioned, if you were bringing Mali Druid, if you're sat in Thijs's chair right now going, okay, Mali Druid, you're practicing for the tournament, what are we coming up against? Priest, maybe Bomb Warrior, maybe Rogue as well, you've got to look at some of those, and then do you actually sit there and go, what if we run into Highlander Mage? What's the matchup? Let's practice, because I honestly don't think, maybe they did, but I don't think it really came up much in conversation or in practice for these players. So I do wonder if they've really nailed down a plan, because Highlander Mage in itself, this expansion, hasn't really taken hold because of the tempo variants that everyone's been jumping on.
Yeah, it's something that I did wonder about Specialist, for the season where we were just running it in GM as a whole. I'm not really sure if, that meta for a start wasn't really well fitted to Specialist. I think we can all kind of agree on that.
Right.
But I don't think we necessarily got the opportunity to see like a Specialist metagame really get fleshed out to its fullest. It's something I've often wondered is like, how much value is there in maybe bringing a deck that like might just be purely suboptimal in terms of like overall win rate, overall tier ranking against the field, for example, but it's a deck that no one has a secondary or tertiary deck prepared for specifically. Right. Like how much of your lost percentage do you, from not having like the best deck in the game in a vanilla sense, do you then gain back by the fact that no one's really able to tech against you super effectively?
Similar to Zoo, right, that we've been seeing. I don't think anyone's really teching against Zoo, because one, it's kind of hard, but two, you're not expecting that much of it going in. So I do agree. I think it's a very interesting format in the right meta, and I think at least even just for this week, the meta has appeared to be quite interesting, because we're getting Mali Druid, Highlander Mage, the Priests, of course. The Warriors are actually not doing as well, considering it was the most banned in previous weeks and so on. So very, very interesting overall, but we are ready to go into this game now. It's the winners match, so the winner does just book themselves a spot on Sunday into the final top four. The loser will fight will play against the winner of the lower bracket match. We're not going to make anyone fight, don't worry. But Thijs on this Malygos Druid, of course, on the top, and Jarla on that Highlander Mage.
But the important question now, Raven, is who would win this group if they did just have to fight?
I don't know if any of them. I don't think any of them would want to. I think they'd all just go, let's just play Hearthstone instead, guys, and they'll be like, yeah, okay.
They'd all just pull the pacifist card.
Yeah, pretty much. Thijs has been making a bit of a habit of being able to get this lurker out, but not having ramp in his opening hand. I'm slightly not counting Bloom, of course, but not having any of the regular ramp in his opening hand here. That's done that every single game so far today.
Does seem that way there. Oh, that changes everything, though, Raven.
Yeah.
So now Vate Growth will send him into 6 next turn, where he could just potentially play Twilight Runner and then play Guardian Animals. Or he can just chill and play 1 turn slower, but still have access to all of the Innovate cards in his hand, which does have some utility later on with some potential Malagos combos, with some Omu combos. But I think I do like this overall.
Yep. Even if he has to go for a Bloom play next turn, it'll just be interesting to see which one he goes for, because is it always just Guardian Animals straight off the bat here for Thijs next turn, or do you think there's a consideration for a slightly slower overflow plan?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that it might even just be Twilight Runner for Thijs next turn, just to avoid the overload turns going forward.
All in due time.
Well, it's true, actually, yeah. I do think it's very difficult to judge. Like, it feels silly to say, but because Thijs has access to multiple powerful options, you do have to just work out which one is the better one, right? Because they're all good, but which one's actually going to help you win the game the most time?
And a lot of it comes back to like what Jarla does here, right? Like if there's any significant pressure building up, maybe Thijs does want to relieve that with an immediate Guardian Animals. But if Jarla just essentially passes like this, not sure Thijs really wants to face the overload here, right? Because if he overloads this turn, he's kind of back in that same spot next turn. So I guess the option is like big 7-mana power play this turn into Twilight Runner next turn.
Into run it, yeah.
Or do it the other way around and hold on to a Lightning Bloom.
It's tough, right? Because he is just taking damage while he does this, or while he doesn't do this, depending on what which option he goes for.
Yeah.
But what do you also think about Jarla just ping past last turn? He could have preemptively just dropped the Firebrand down, very similar to how we saw a lot of players approach a slightly different deck with Tempo Mage, but just having like the Spider Tank effect. I don't think it would have been a terrible choice.
Yeah, I agree. I think having it preloaded there potentially as well helps him deal with a Guardian Animal with a Twilight Runner being just dropped, which is something that we can see can happen, but on the other side of that, potentially Firebrand devolving missiles as an option from hand is pretty well known now as quite a good counter, generally from being used in Tempo Mage, a counter to Guardian Animals when it does come down, which was very possible there from Thijs. Jarla knows that Thijs still had a kept card in that scenario, which was the Lightning Bloom in this case. But if you look at cards that Thijs would be keeping, Guardian Animals, it's Lightning Bloom, it's potentially cards that be able to swing board states, and now Jarla's able to swing the board state right back using the Firebrand.
It does get the job done. Thijs got 6-0, which is not bad at all. He could also just switch it up and go for Teacher's Pet if he wants something a little bit and more resilient again to back it up with. Could just go for the ramp as well, which would open up the Ysera or a overflow into options next turn, which I think, again, because Thijs isn't really expecting to just die on turn 5 against Jarla, or for Jarla to really put any kind of real pressure on this turn, I do like that take the opportunity to ramp, and now Thijs is just on 10 mana for the rest of the game.
Yeah, it will allow him to accelerate extremely quickly from this point onwards. Ooh.
Bit of an uncommon outcome there. Don't see that often.
The Brotherhood shall prevail.
Yeah, I'm just going to set up the Cleave here as an 8/8, though. Very nicely done. But yeah, it is kind of a niche interaction. If at any point Devolving Missiles hits a dormant minion with no other targets on the board, it will just stop like that because it considers there are no more legal targets.
It is the one true, like, always factual thing is dormant minions kind of don't exist on the board.
Yeah.
A lot of that's the base way to think about it, and it's always true. There are actually, like, no exceptions to that, right?
Not that I'm aware of.
I'm waiting for the tweet any minute.
Yeah, I mean, the exception is, I guess, the board space, right? Like, it does just use the board space.
Sure.
But other than that, no.
Jarla looks like he's going to simplify this game, at least in his own mind, and say, Tartut's a bit of a pain to get through. I'm just going to hit you for a turn and make it as awkward as possible. The card can be busted through very easily, but the question is there enough backup to deal with an 8-8 as well as the rest of the board that's going to be round? And at least right now, Saul, it doesn't look like there is much of. Although now the swipe plus trade and Moonfire does get the job done.
Do you need to do that, though? Is it a bit panicky in this scenario?
I wonder.
To kill an 8-8?
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem, for sure.
Pretty big problem.
Yeah, but you have so much power in your deck, though, that you're just not unleashing here with the overflow. The problem is the overflow only sends you to 15, which is very unfortunate in this scenario.
Which seems potentially quite dead.
I think you still do it though, right? Like, you just trade like this. You're at 15, your opponent has 11. Like, just isn't that big a deal. Highlander Mage doesn't really, like, fire a bunch of spells at you from hand, right?
I guess with Zephyrus gone, there's a certain level of safety. Now the Anubisath is going to be a really nice addition to the turn here. Thijs, Crystal Pyro himself to go up to 20 as well. So yeah, I guess you could say this turn was alright. Thijs?
Yeah, I love this. No fear. Zero respect for the 8-8. Thijs recognizes he's the one playing the gross deck. He doesn't have to worry too much about what his opponent's doing. Just keep doing his powerful things, and he's likely to get there in the end. I think this is really good recognition from Thijs. The key, though, was the ability to Moonfire through the second half of the Kartut Defender and then take the trade on board, which reduced the power from 11 to 14. Because if he couldn't do that, he had to hit either Anubisath or additional healing off the overflow, or he would have ended up being dead. But it, again, might have even still been a risk that he might have ended up taking, because he's so likely with 5 draws to find some form of additional defense, right? And I think as soon as he hit one form of additional defense, he was probably feeling in pretty good shape.
And now, suddenly, this looks pretty rough for Jarla, doesn't it?
Yup.
He can not really achieve anything he wants to this turn, or at least not cleanly anyway. Like none of the numbers add up well, do they? And the fact that there's a 4/10 next to the Anubisath is huge as well, because this rolling fireball just doesn't, again, really do a large impactful thing. There's what, 4, 7, 14 damage just on board for Thijs now?
Portals just keep on coming. Soul of the Forest even got generated off the Onyx Mage Scribe.
I think right
Bees the Doomsayer and then Soul of the Forest everything.
Okay.
Let's go.
I was looking at just landing the Malagos with Moonfire here.
Okay.
Clear the whole board. You're going into Jarla's turn 8. Like, what's he going to do against a Malagos?
Okay.
You stick it, and then there's the follow-up of swipe and so on afterwards. But I do appreciate the Bees Soul of the Forest play as well.
The Bees play is funnier. It does have that going for it.
And you know me, I will never argue with someone doing the funnier play.
Okay. Jarla got up his sleeve
Strictly
here.
less funny.
He's going to bloom Soul of the Forest, the more aggressive board initially. Sure, I'm okay with this.
Okay.
It's fine.
Seems fine, just not funny. Does mean as well that Thijs is overloaded next turn, so
Yes.
Malagos without some kind of help isn't going to be playable for like a Malagos Moonfire out of nowhere. So it does mean Thijs has given himself some restrictions going forward, but still, this board is so resilient and such a nightmare to deal with here. Look at on 8 mana, Jarla pinged something, didn't really change much, and played a 4/7 against this board. It's not looking great, is it?
And he is just showing 20 on board right now, which means he doesn't even really need the Mali to be ending this game most of the time. can look for the card draws here. He sacrifices 2 damage. Interesting. Okay, wants to make space on the board for any additional dragons that he draws off the...
Or the second swipe, right? Second swipe would have just been lethal?
Yeah.
Another dragon.
It is not yet your
Imagine Thijs will play removal here. Let's get rid of that Archmage. Push 1,000,000, and now with his Overload unlocked on the following turn, he now has access to full Omu Mali combo if this board does get cleared up. But, I mean, imagine this board getting cleared up from this position, right?
Yeah, I mean, the only frustration would realistically be a Nova at that point, right?
Yeah.
To actually just stall the board out and say, I'm going to have a couple of turns to draw Reno or do some kind of box to dig himself out there. But he couldn't. And Thijs, you know, let's just go back to the Van Cleef response, I guess, from Thijs. And that was really solid, honestly. I know in that position, I would have overreacted and cleared stuff and maybe lost the game because of it. But that was just a very, I think, just composed way to deal with a quite scary looking board because he was close to just dead if things didn't quite line up the way they did. But as you said, the overflow did give him a very good chance at getting some kind of extra additional layers of comfort there and defense.
Yeah, and even then, like, it was just enough security. Like, even if the absolute disaster happened and he hit 0 defensive dragons off his portal, he didn't hit the Anubisath Defender, he didn't hit the Crystal Power, he'd still be out of range. As you said, Zephyrus was gone. That's why the Egwin was there in the first place. Like, the burst damage just wasn't really there to be represented from Jarla. It would be like a Malagos out at that point. You know, Mage Malagos into Frostbolt, I guess, maybe could have ended the game or something weird like that. But outside of that, he seemed pretty safe to just do disgusting Druid things, which I fully respect. I think, you know, Druid loses more games than they win when they're forced to respect what their opponent is doing. Like, Druid is a disrespectful class. Generally, good Druid decks are built in ways that they don't care what you're doing. They're just going to do things that are stronger, and that's your problem. You're going to have to deal with it.
Yeah, it sounds like the players are getting ready to go into game number 2, and Thijs is stuck to his primary deck, and Jarla has switched to that secondary for this one. So once more, Jarla is losing some of the earlier tools and some of the removal, and heading more in a I'm going to keep dropping minions to style with Khadgar as your explorer, Frizz, Kindle Roost, the Potion of Illusion, and a Tortolan Pilgrim added to his list for this one. So I can definitely get behind this. Just more consistent stuff to play on board.
Yeah, as I said right at the beginning, this is about what I expected. Don't see anything in Thijs' secondary or tertiary that's built to mess with this matchup. His secondary deck is a bit more anti-aggro, even, and his tertiary is the weapon destruction build, whereas on Jarla's side, just the ability of having that extra Khadgar ability and just a bit of extra mid-game power, he can get to dropping big threats a little bit quicker than he was able to do in the last game. And that's probably his best chance in the matchup, but it still doesn't seem like it's going to be too great for him, especially after the Breath of Dreams overgrowth start.
Yeah, this is not looking great, is it? And it's I just realized Thijs just dropped the shades out of nowhere.
Yeah.
It's not looking great, is it? Because this is Druid doing the powerful things Druid wants to do to win games. Previously today, we've seen Thijs not really hit the wild growth and not really hit those big payoff tools. But now, as Jarla is getting ready to go into his measly 5 mana turn, Thijs is like, should I play a 9-drop this turn? What if he just plays Alex Straza aggressively and just wins? That's what I want to see from Sunglasses Thijs right now.
I think it's a 4-12 rather than an 8-8, personally.
Oh,
Whoa!
yes!
Thijs disagrees!
Yes!
Okay.
Look, Sunglasses Thijs cares not for your value plays. He just wants to kill him.
So, like, my curve here was Vate Sarah, then you have Coin Guardian Animals on the follow-up. and then you potentially have Alex Straza at that point having, generated a board of dragons where you just Alex them and you hit them with your board of dragons and they're dead, which to me seemed like a better way of going about it. But who am
My
I
question
to argue with the
is-
might of Swag Thijs?
If you were wearing sunglasses and asked you what your play would it be Alex Straza them in the face? Because I think it would.
Hold on, we can test this experiment. No, I think I'd have to go
Okay,
downstairs to get me sunglasses.
See, and that's the difference. Thijs always has sunglasses to hand. At any point, he's ready for subtle, ill-prepared.
Yeah.
Jarla does technically have an answer to this with this polymorph he got hold of. Would take a little bit of a 1 damage, but still it is an answer. But even now, Thijs does have a reasonable follow-up because he can just coin out guardian animals this turn.
Yeah. But yeah, this is where things get interesting to me, right? Because, if Thijs had committed less pressure last turn, we might have just seen Thijs play a minion, for example, and then this could have been Guardian Animals rush into Twilight Runner to draw some dragons after you've played the Ysera Unleashed, which was certainly where my head was at. But Thijs has decided he wants to get this one over nice and quick, and has just dropped the Alex Straza preemptively. The one thing I will say is, I mentioned it earlier, Mage doesn't really restore that health. That's kind of done at this point, right? You've just gotten down to that point. They might gain some armor here and there with Amazing Reno or whatever else, but outside of puzzle box nonsense and sometimes a Cartoon Defender, which I do not believe is in the build that's currently been playing. Yeah, it's one of the removed cards in the secondary deck. That health is just not being restored.
Yeah, what has been restored to us is regular Thijs. As the sunglasses come off, he's had to play his series, playing a more standard, longer game now, so he cannot wear the sunglasses while playing them.
Oh, don't tease me again, Jarla. I want to see it. Just do it. It's fine. This always works. Yeah.
It's probably just to play as well, right? It just is stuff.
Never been struck by lightning. Job done.
And they both? Interesting. Okay.
A simple spell should do.
It's curious to me because of visual order of operations, the minions have already generated before you pick which one to put the illusion on, right?
Yeah.
So
it's
make
definitely one of
just
those weird things because one has to go first.
Yes, exactly. But so purely by eyeballing it, you might expect that you get an extra copy that isn't an illusion. But in terms of the actual sequencing under the hood, that does not appear to be how it works.
Imagine the second one died as well, and you'd be like,
Wait, what?
It's well, it is a copy, and it's just a duplicate, right? So if one died, the other one died. That's just not how it works.
Yeah.
Problem now is Thijs, without the card draw backup, he's looking a little bit dry for resources right now. He does have the Anubis to put a bit of a speed bump in the way.
Right.
But you don't want speed bumps at this point, right? Thijs wants to end the game. He doesn't really want Jarla to have time to start, chain dropping the big threats.
Yeah.
Ooh.
You're in my hands now.
Look what the options are for Tortolan. Looks like a fairly straightforward power of creation. Or would you put a water elemental on average higher? Wait a minute.
Latent Decoy is so nutty! Not only does it have the opportunity to, disrupt key combo cards from Thijs, but Jarla's minions are just on average huge.
But it could also mean it could give Thijs just a free Mally on board as well.
That is true.
So it's like,
I mean,
It's
in this
looking bad,
scenario,
though.
not so much, because Thijs would kind of have to commit mana to killing the decoys to get his Mally in play to begin with.
right. Yeah, normally that's when your opponent has something stuck, right? So they can make the trades happen, but Thijs is just going to concede. And the problem there is, whichever way you stand on the swag play of the Alex Straza versus the Ysera, the problem really there for Thijs was he never got that absurd druid card draw going, did he, right? He never had those druid hands where you've got your full hand every single turn for the rest of the game. And if he did, that would have looked different. If you have access to swipes, have access to some other tools as well, or even just more minions to play out, it would have looked very, very different there. But the help of that secondary deck from Jarla, he had the Khadgar from that massive turn with the Jandis, and that really did pay off for him, because the fact that he got not bad minions, not amazing minions, but 2 5/5s, 2 4/4s, and with a lack of swipe, it meant that Thijs had to clear those 4/4s. Even though it's just 1 damage, he had to clear them in a bit of an awkward fashion, and it was just too much too soon for him to deal with there. So, rough game there, honestly, for Thijs. It looked over so quickly, but Jarla's holding on yet again.
Yeah, I think the lack of swipe is definitely a big talking point there, because if because you get double illusion, as we saw, then swipe was absolutely monstrous against that board. But it's another talking point on the Alexstrasza play, I guess, where obviously one of the key cards that really makes Mali Druid in particular tick is Overflow. Like, you really want to get an Overflow cast pretty early on in the game a lot of the time to be powerful. Which, you know, I was talking about how that damage will just stick. It's not getting healed up. Well, it is if you end up casting an Overflow at some point after that to refill yourself on resources, right? But we are off to the races again. Game number 3 now, going all the way down to the wire. And now Jarla has an option that I'm very, very interested in. Which
what is that option?
The option for Zephyrus into Wild Growth with this secondary build of Mage that he's playing that does have the power to push out a lot of minions early. Jarla turns it down, clearly feeling like he does need to be more reactive with the Zephyrus, perhaps because he has Mana Saber in hand as well, which can allow him a little bit of that ramp that he might need. But I was kind of curious in seeing what Jarla's decision is here, because I will absolutely bow to his decisions with these builds of Highlander Mage, which is not really something that I have experience with so far. But it's felt like something that could be appealing, where you just, you know, Wild Growth out potentially ahead of the Druid and then start beating them up with the additional big minions that you've put in the deck.
Yeah, I think the big deal for me is, with coin and 3/4 drops, what's the Wild Growth actually for? Right?
Sure.
Because instead he can go coin 4 into 4 into 4 if he really wants to. And as you mentioned, the Escape Mana Saber acts like a kind of Wild Growth at parts. That maybe the idea now is, because there are so many early minion pressure from him with those 4 drops, the Zephyrus is the backup tool, right, that he can use to actually just say, okay, well, this either creates lethal potential or hard removal or solves some kind of problem, instead of doing something that the coin kind of lets him do anyway, because there's such a big gap between turns 4 and 9 with what minion base he's got in his hand.
The ordering of that curve is particularly interesting, though, as to how you're going to deal with this Ghidra, how your curve works out just naturally for yourself.
Yeah, I was looking at what's the biggest payoff for a potential potion next turn as well. It's very greedy.
Oh,
I wondered
Raven.
if he could just go Mana Saber and then to do something with potion
Oh,
to
Raven.
like actually go potion Mana Saber again.
It's too early for you to be getting in your bag already, alright?
I'll always jump in on the potion play. Sol, you know this.
I can't be handling this. Anyway, in serious world, Jarla just got the biggest moment of relief of his entire life, because he played out a minion into a Ghidra, had no way to answer it, was probably fully expecting to get smacked with the overgrowth for the huge minion on the follow-up. But nothing doing for Thijs, and now Jarla does pretty much just get to play out his curve here. And this is why I was kind of curious about the way the curve worked without the wild growth, is that this Mana Saber doesn't really ramp him into anything super impactful immediately. Like, it's not bridging the big gap he has, right, which is between his 4 drops and his 9 drops. And whereas potentially a wild growth curve could have done that a little bit better.
Yeah, and again, just so I'm going to throw them at you, Sol, but what about even now? He could actually play his Astromancer, attack, and then potion, and have a pretty solid value from this.
That's fair.
Oh, okay, we're making progress. Fair is a response I've got to one of my potion suggestions.
Yeah, I mean...
We're getting there.
you get multiple valuable minions off it, and a very, very weird Twilight Drake as well. It's like a 1-mana 1/8 at some point during the game. But I feel like, but this is Druid, right? Like, this is why I super don't want to get baited by Potion in this scenario.
Right.
Is like, I don't want to spend 4 mana doing nothing. I want to spend that 4 mana playing a 5/4 that hits my opponent in the head really, really hard.
And one thing I will say about the ordering of 4 drops, I could 100% see Frizz being last in almost any outcome, because with Twilight Drake, Alex, and Alex in hand, that does only leave Caligos and Malygos as the actual like benefactors of playing Frizz. So there's at that point, it's just there's no rush to play Frizz out and be like, oh, I've got so many dragons I could draw at that point to get the reduction.
Right. Nothing doing here for Thijs, though. Really, really slow opening.
Yeah, and this is one of the payoffs of Jarla holding Zephyrus, because now he can actually put his foot down on the game if he really wants to, right? He can say, I've got bored, here's your play, you know, Thijs responds to try and fight back, like similar to this turn. Jarla could maybe go for a Zephyrus turn now and to help deal with this and keep putting the pressure on. Maybe not this turn specifically, but just as an overall plan, use Zephyrus to just keep the pressure high against Thijs.
Sorry, I almost didn't want to, like, you know, take my turn there, because I can't believe that we've passed back to the first turn for Jarla where it was possible to play Zephyrus Potion of Illusion, and you just haven't brought that up.
That's going to be my next point.
Okay.
I was giving you your turn to speak, so
Okay.
I was literally sat here going, so what do you think about 1-mana Zephyrus?
Uh-huh.
The real problem with it right now is, although it's a cool play, 100%, you need to make sure the first Zephyrus you play does something and achieves something, right? You can't just be like, haha, I've got a 1-mana Zephyrus now. Like, what does the first one do?
Yeah, exactly. So I think it sucks. Like, this was the plan that Jarla was setting up, I think, by keeping the Mana Saber stealthed, is to just ramp into Tiamat this turn.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that double sucks. Everything about that turn was just extremely unfortunate if your name is Jarla. But because the Taunt minion was in the way, it means you're like wasting this attack from the Mana Saber to get your Tiamat down, and then the fact that it was the Emperor Cobra at the end, like those two outcomes specifically are night and day in terms of influencing how Jarla is ahead or behind in the game right now.
Yeah, and this could be the turning point here for Thijs. Kind of struggled a little bit up until this point, but the Twilight Runner can draw cards, and if it draws into any kind of like active live ramp such as that, then that's going to help him set up his next turn, whether it's the sunglasses come out for the Alexstrasza again, or whether it's the more likely just get your Sera down earlier. Then there's the overflow backup. Like, this is looking, you know, just look at Thijs' hand, right? He's in a much better position than he was last game, and he's held off the chain 4 drops from Jarla so far.
Yep.
One mana 1/1 rush win field.
Oh, we're gonna fall out, Raven. It's gonna happen.
Yeah. But now you know I'm only saying it because it's winding you up.
Yeah, I know.
At least you know.
I know.
Realistically, though,
still doesn't mean we're not gonna have an actual argument, though. It's gonna happen.
Does Jarla have to piece together some kind of Zephyrus turn here?
I've been looking at it. I'm just not entirely sure what it is. Like, if you ping the 5/1 first, then have 3.
Like, explosive shot deals with everything overall except the death rattle.
Okay, sure.
And maybe explosive shot deals with something more. The Anubisath is actually very frustrating as to where it is now, because explosive shot, if Anubisath was in the middle,
yeah,
be huge.
Agreed.
I will crush your delusions of grandeur.
Your wish is my suggestion.
Sweet, Jarla's gonna take Fan here? Okay, sure.
Deals with the immediate threats, the Anubisath as a 3-3. It's annoying, but it's not going to win Thijs the game right now. Whereas more card draw from the Twilight Runner, or even just a lot of damage from the 4-2 that was stealth, I can get behind this. It's definitely not, you know, the Zephyrus you want, but it's the Zephyrus I think Jarla needed that turn.
Yeah, he was just starting to fall too far behind, and I think his hand is powerful but very slow, so he can't really afford to be behind at this point in the game. He just wants to be, if he feels like if he can fight at this point from an even footing, he has a chance.
Funnily enough, if this turn, or if there wasn't removal as easily as there is, there was some world in which this turn was the Anubisath, say, kills the Siamat, and then Jarla does have a good potion to turn after, right? Hitting Zephyrus and Solarium when you've already had a good Zephyrus. It was a chance, but it was slim.
Deep Freeze drawn is a little awkward. Makes the turtle worse this turn.
What does Jarla have available to him that is impactful with the Tortolan this turn? Disregarding Deep Freeze now that it's drawn, of course. Is there anything that seems worthwhile, or does he have to look at Conjurers?
So Power of Creation box are both in there as like kind of the universally good ones, but there's a lot of whiffs as well. Like Rolling Fireball's still in there, Frost Nova's okay, Arcane Insight's okay, but there's still Ray of Frost, Evolving Missiles, Arcane Breath as well. So, you know, he's certainly not guaranteed to get an impactful option. That's kind of what I meant when I said like the Deep Freeze being drawn is kind of annoying. So I think with all three of those still in the deck, Power of Creation, Puzzle Box, Deep Freeze, what are the chances your Tortolan whiffs at that point? Pretty low, right? So I think you'd end up going for it a lot of the time. But with the Deep Freeze getting drawn, I think Jarla just has to play a slightly weaker turn without an additional 5/5 on the board.
Yep, failure rate being disastrous at this point in the series. Yeah. There's some dragons, though.
Now it has to be the Tortolan, right? If you whiff on the box, you look for the Frost Nova, and then you have Amazing Reno potentially on the follow-up.
I think so. I think priority number one is get to Reno without dying.
Yeah.
And if that is most likely with a box, or with the Tortolan at least trying, then fair enough. What do you think about trading the Solarian first, though?
You're in my hands now.
Oh. Would you have traded the Solarian first? I think I would have at that point.
It's certainly something to think about, right? But I think also you can get the Nova there instead. Like, I think because you have Reno in hand, I think you even would have chosen Frost Nova over Puzzle Box, because Frost Nova over the course of 2 turns like always does the thing you need, whereas this is kind of just betting the series. At which point, like, suiciding your Solarian for no reason, does that make sense? Is there any real downside to it either?
If you're Reno anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, overall a
terrible box.
Passable, I would say.
That's
it didn't achieve. Well, it didn't achieve what Jarla really wanted to do, but he is taking significantly less damage because of the box.
Yeah.
It didn't backfire. I think that's the key thing, right? It didn't lose him the game.
I don't know. Here in European Grandmasters, Raven, we have extremely high standards for what puzzle boxes look like. That's all I'm saying.
I bring life and
Get him.
I actually really like this. This might look strange. Oh, just play more stuff into a potential Reno. But as you mentioned, the damage, like permanence, I guess, with Mage is pretty reliable, right? You know they're only really going to gain a little bit of armor. And this will, in a lot of cases, force a Reno if there's one there. And if there is, like, Thijs has plenty of other stuff to get on with, right? He can draw the rest of his deck, more or less. He can maybe, even based on this, go just set up the lethal, which is what he's realistically doing with the Malagos. If there's no Reno, of course. He's basically making Jarla have it right now.
And he does. So the game will continue, but that very much was a check to see if the game got to continue or not. And just because Jarla has passed that check does not mean he is anywhere close to out of the woods just yet.
Ooh. Close.
Seven damage per Moonfire? 8 damage per Moonfire, right?
Yep, that's just game of the squall, right?
Yep.
Oh, for a start, I was looking at the bloom just to see if it was going to help him get anywhere, but look at Thijs, just the shrug and the nod and the smile. Yes, sir, you have won your match, and you are through to the top 4. Whereas Jarla taking a loss there, it's going to feel maybe a little bit bad with the outcome because the squall, we can see, of course, unlocked enough damage. I think it was even potentially close, if not enough, with just the swipes and the moonfires with the squall. I kind of didn't look at the numbers, but it was a pretty solid victory there for Thijs overall. And honestly, like Malygos Druid feels like maybe the slight out of the box approach to this week, and it does seem to be paying off pretty well for Thijs.
It does seem powerful, yeah. Certainly the meta that we've ended up with in Europe, where the people who are countering Priest effectively, outside of Viper, who has kind of gone the more aggro route with the Zoo, and the people who are countering Priest effectively are kind of doing it with, weirdly like clunky, greedy decks themselves, like Highlander Mage with Jarla. So when you add those combinations together, Mali Druid having this inevitable conclusion that's also just very, very fast, and they get set up and are threatening to kill you like far, far quicker than, say, a Highlander Mage or a Priest is really able to deal with. That is paying out certainly pretty well so far for Thijs and for a few of the other Mali Druid players across all of the regions.
Yeah, and I guess maybe it's a positive, maybe it's a negative, depending on where Jarla wants to look at it. But either way, his opponent will be one of the priests that's left over, as we are getting ready to go into a priest mirror. And again, you mentioned Jarla hasn't had great success during Swiss against priest, but has beaten a priest already today. So again, depending on what mindset is in, he might be okay with knowing exactly what he's going to face. But we do have Psycho versus Silvername coming up as well. And as we mentioned, this is going to be the priest mirror. But my question really, Sol, is do either of these players have anything that really sticks out? Is any of them gaining like a huge advantage here? Because it looks like they've taken slightly different approach to the priest mirror secondary deck.
They have, yeah, and I believe both of their secondary decks are the ones they will be running from Game 2 onwards. Obviously, Game 1 has to be primary versus primary. It's just the way that Specialist works. But Psycho's list, this is a list that we're seeing from quite a few players. I talked about how Alan Numbers has it in APAC, but there's a kind of a practice group that have come up with this together. And it actually cuts Mindrender for the Priest Mirror, which is fascinating because like a lot of the time we've been talking about how Mindrender can potentially set up these big tempo pushes for you, and with the priest matchup now generally seeming like it is a bit more tempo focused, but these players are choosing to cut it out here because of the implications it can have. And we've seen it actually, despite us saying that it might be pretty powerful, it ends up underperforming generally when we see it. Like, it's one of those cards where a lot of the time casters are like, whoa, it's insane here because we can see both hands and we know it's insane.
Right.
But if you don't have that information and you miss that exact window, we've seen players trying to play it in priest matchups and it really not working out particularly well for them. There is also an additional weird downside with Alucia where it stacks multiple draw steps on one side of the matchup, if that makes any sense. So it influences the fatigue counter. If things do progress towards fatigue, if you play Alucia, you've drawn a card, you've then passed your deck to your opponent, who then draws a card, who then passes their deck back to you, and you then draw a card. So 3 card draws in a row are from the same deck, yours. So you end up, falling potentially pretty far behind in fatigue if it does get to that point, even though priest matchups tend not to a little bit these days. They can still reach that point. So this group as a whole that have come up with this list clearly feels like Mindrender is actually just not a card they want for the priest mirror, which is something that I find a little bit surprising. And in place of that, they're just looking for extra value, extra removal, extra swing turns. Thought Steal comes in, Psychic Conjurer comes in, Shadow Word Ruin comes in. In Psycho's list, it's a Shield of Galakrond, but we've seen it be Headmaster Kel'Thuzad in a few other decks that are doing with the same strategy.
Yep, I agree, and I think we've got a long way to go to find what the sweet spot is for mind render, because I still think players need to discover at least the acceptable turns, right? Like, oh, if I always try and aim it around this point in this matchup, does it always just do a decent job, right? So then is it just worth playing at that point? I know that's very difficult to do, but I'm sure there are spots in matchups where you can say, this is normally just good going into this turn. But we'll see if that gets fleshed out. And maybe as a nod towards the matchup we're about to have, one of the players isn't quite ready for this priest mirror. I don't know if I'm ever going to be ready, if I'm honest. But we are going to go to a quick break while we make sure the players are good to go, 100% good for the matchup. So don't go anywhere, and we'll be right back to kick off this match with some more Grandmasters.